give you the guidelines that I can, the information I can. Unfortunately, each body responds differently. So there aren't so many things I can say that are going to be general. This is when this happens.
Right.
It's going to be different for each person.
Yeah.
There's some of that. First of all, we have our last meal, and for the next 8 to 12 hours, if the body's looking for nutrients, or anything, it's going to go to the digestive tract. Beyond about 8 to 12 hours, whatever's still sitting there is not really very useful. And so if your body needs something, it's not going to go to the digestive tract anymore. What the body needs, what the body's looking for is fuel, right? It's not so much nutrients. Our nutrient needs shift dramatically, and in some cases you might say inexplicably. Like, how's it possible, right? We talked, I think, in the first week, for those of you that were here, about vitamin C deficiency and scurvy. And it only takes 4 to 6 weeks to develop scurvy if you have no vitamin C. And yet, I've taken nearly 500 people 6 weeks or longer, many of them 7, 8 weeks, the longest 18 and a half weeks, no one's ever developed scurvy or any other deficiency condition, almost all of which take only 4 to 6 weeks to develop. So your body's need for nutrients is much different. But what the body needs is energy. It's looking for calories, okay? So, and primarily, what's the fuel that the body's looking for? Sugar. So where does the body go after there's nothing useful in the digestive tract?
Liver.
Goes to the liver, okay? In the liver, we store glycogen. Glycogen is a glucose precursor. So the body can easily, readily convert, that's why we have it. That's how we store glucose. So the body converts glycogen to glucose. Now, where else do we store glycogen? It's not just the liver.
Muscle tissue?
We store it in muscles, but we don't really use muscle glycogen while fasting. Why not? Well, remember that fasting is something, they say that fasting is the voluntary abstinence from food. So what happens if you're in the jungle and you can't find any? Okay, there's been a fire, drought, flood, whatever, or you've injured yourself. It's not really voluntary, but if for whatever reason you haven't eaten for a while, let's say it's been a week and you haven't eaten for some reason. You injured yourself. Okay, you've been lying on the ground, healing, recuperating. There was no food. Now you feel well enough to go walk. Wouldn't it be a good thing if you still had energy to fuel your muscles? So you could go find the food and climb a tree if you needed to? Imagine some of you after a week fasting, you can barely get to your room. How are you going to go hiking for food and climbing trees if you need to climb trees to get any food? Remember, your weakness, tiredness, dizziness, whatever was happening for you, had nothing to do with a lack of energy. It had to do with toxins in your bloodstream. Okay, completely different thing. In a clean organism in the nature, going without food doesn't stop them from doing what they need to do. We talked, I think, yesterday about the polar bear. Remember, 5 months underground, no food or water. I didn't tell you something, and now's the time to talk about this. On average, for the bear, mama bear, and her 2 little baby cubs, to get their first meal, they've got to hike 75 miles on average before they eat anything. And she's eaten nothing for 5 months, and they're little tiny babies. They're going 75 miles before they get their first meal. Okay? So you can understand, fasting doesn't mean you're weak and ineffective. Unless your body's toxic, then that's what happens. Okay? But it's true, some people aren't going to feel as weak and tired for various reasons. It could be because their body's not going as deep. Did I share with you guys, I think I might have in the first week, had a good friend who was a professional videographer, fast with me 30 days. This would have been 16, 17 years ago. Fasted the whole month of October and spent the entire fast walking around with a 100-pound camera on his shoulder because he wanted to capture everything. And he said, I feel fine. I don't need to rest. And then he worked out. He drove up because he lived an hour away, and he drove up with his weight bench and his weight set and started lifting weights as soon as he could and running, really, really serious about fitness. The following year, he came back and did the same thing. 30 days, the whole month of October, but this time I'd had a whole bunch of time to work on it, and I convinced him to try it my way, okay, resting completely. No camera, no filming, laying in bed, eyes closed, resting. On the 4th or 5th day, he came to me and said, I don't think this is working. I said, what do you mean? He said, I feel much weaker than I did last year. I said, that's great. He said, what do you mean that's great? I said that you feel weaker because your body's actually doing what you came for it to do. It's cleansing and healing, so you don't feel very good. Here's the interesting thing. He came up again with his van, with his weight bench and weights. At the end of a week, he was lifting more and running faster that second year at the end of a week than he was at the end of a month the first year. So he felt much weaker in the process, but he rebounded much faster because his body was much cleaner and much more efficient. Okay, so he rebuilt muscle much faster. He recovered his athletic performance much faster. Okay? Honestly, think about it from my perspective. Some of you might be thinking, why are you harassing us? You're here. You already paid. If you think I'm in this for the money, I already got your money. You do whatever you want, right? I don't care. But I do care. I do this because I care about you and I want you to get the best benefits that you can. I don't need to spend every single day telling you, why aren't you resting more? Do whatever you want. But I want you to see you get the benefits. And I guarantee you're going to get far more benefits the less you do. Okay, the more you rest, the more spectacular your transformation is going to be. That's what happens. It happens over and over again. Okay? So where were we? Stages, right.
Yes.
Okay, so glycogen, liver glycogen, 8 to 12 hour supply. Okay, we're now 16 to 24 hours into the process. What happens now? Anyone? Muscle. Okay, it's not what you want to hear. There are a lot of people out there who tell me I'm an idiot because this can't be. Why would the body do that? It's simple why the body does that. We're set up to run on sugar. Your body doesn't know that you're fasting for 21 or 26 or 30 days. Your body only knows, well, it's been another few hours, there's still no food. Let's just take a little bit. We can make sugar from muscle. We don't make sugar from fat. So let's make a little sugar. Just a little bit. And it keeps doing that, thinking, well, maybe there'll be a meal coming. Right? We'll just do it a little bit more. We finally get to a point where the body says, you know what? Don't want to lose any more muscle. It's time to switch over to a safe long-term source. We don't know how long it's going to be. Let's go to something that's safer for the long term. And that's when your body starts to switch over. Now, that starts to happen for most people on the third day. Not the 10th or 11th day, on the third day. On the 10th or 11th day, you're fully switched over. Most people. And there's some variation. If you have very little muscle, if you start with very little muscle mass, you would have gone into ketosis faster. Why? Because your body doesn't have as much muscle to give up. Okay? If, on the other hand, if we had a giant bodybuilder who comes in 200 pounds, all muscle, they're going to go a little longer because their body can afford to give up some of that muscle. Might actually prefer to lose some of that muscle. Some of that muscle can actually be a burden, right? I met a guy once, bodybuilder, that couldn't feed himself. He couldn't get his hand to his mouth anymore because his arms were too big. I'm not kidding. I mean, maybe with a fork, but like he couldn't bite an apple with his hand. Okay, this is stupid. This is never going to happen in nature.
He must have used steroids.
Well, most of them do. Well, I had a client from the UK who was a bodybuilder, competitive bodybuilder. And I haven't told you the story. I completed a 5-hour seminar in Exeter on the southern coast of England. And at the end, this guy walked up to me and hands me an 8x10 glossy photo of himself in a little bikini. And I said, thanks, but I prefer girls. And he said, no, I'm a bodybuilder and wanted to show you that. I'm a vegan bodybuilder. I wanted to show you what's possible. I said, okay. And I worked with him, and he actually became raw vegan. And he had his highest performance, his best performances. He may not be competing anymore. This was almost 20 years ago. But his best performances came as a raw vegan. He placed third in national competition. And he said to me, I'll probably never win because everybody else is doping. Everyone. Okay? They're taking hormones. You're never going to get as big if you don't do that. But it's terrible for you. It's really, really bad for you. All right, so muscle. Now, again, the body starts to switch over by day 3. Day 10 or 11 is where you get to the deepest part of the process. Okay? You're going to be consuming the greatest percentage of body fat from then on, and body fat is where we store most of the toxins, so your process is more effective at eliminating garbage from the body. That's where it's going to become most efficient. That's where you're going to get the most benefit. And most people, starting right around day 10, 11, 12, most people seem to notice that things go a bit deeper. They feel a little bit more slow, a little more tired. That's because things have gone deeper. Anyone notice this in the last few days? Yeah, look around. It's happened to a lot of people. Okay, it's typical. That's what happens. Now, and then we stay where we are. We stay in that part of the process until we use up all the fat reserves. Once there's no, and that doesn't mean zero fat. We have to have some fat. Okay, you need 2%, 2 to 2.5% body fat is called essential fat, which means what? Can't live without it. Okay, you got to have some fat. In fact, your brain is made of fat, so that probably doesn't even include the brain. That's just skeletal fat. At that point, if you continue, if you don't eat when you get to that point, you're no longer fasting. That's called starving. Okay, this is where your body begins consuming vital tissue, and that's not a good thing. There's no benefit from doing that. So you don't want to fast beyond that point. Again, technically you can't fast beyond that point, but you don't want to keep going beyond that point. Now, it's not hard to know when it is. What message do you think your body sends you when it uses up all the fat reserves?
Hunger.
Yeah, you feel hungry, and it's unmistakable. Okay, your body sends you a very clear message. It's time to eat. The problem for some people is they're so stuck up here. They don't get it. They're not listening. They're not getting the message from the body. So people starve to death. It's happened. I mean, not here, but there are people who fast on their own that have starved to death. How did you miss that strong signal to eat? Or maybe they got it and ignored it because they just wanted to keep going. Oh, who knows? People do crazy things. Okay? That's the process. That's what it looks like. And we can talk about specific conditions like hypertension. Okay? Hypertension, high blood pressure. In 22 years now, in March we were 22, we've had 100% success eliminating hypertension with 21 days of fasting or more. Less than 21 days is not long enough, and some people will still have blood pressure that's higher than it should be. But so far, with 21 days or more, everyone's had, I think I mentioned to you, I just had a guy complete his fast, and his blood pressure at the very end of our 4-week process was 122 over 70 something. Technically above normal, but I think close enough to count, right? It's not below 120, but right there. I mean, this is starting at like 170 over whatever, okay? Huge change. Never fails to happen, never fails to happen. Type 2 diabetes, 21 days is long enough to eliminate it. Where we see Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, these are conditions that typically require 26 to 30 days fasting. Okay? And other conditions, it just depends what it is.
Arthritis?
It depends on the situation. How bad it is, where it is, what's happening. It's going to vary depending on what it is. My mother, who visits every year, when I first moved here for her birthday, she turned 70 2 months before we moved to Central America 14 years ago. In fact, her birthday was a couple days ago. And so we had a little surprise party for her, and I gave her round-trip flights to come visit. And I said, you can just come and visit, or you can come and fast. And she said, and she surprised me because I've been trying to convince her for years to fast. Didn't want to. She'd been suffering from severe arthritis since she was in her 30s, on pain medication every single day. So on her 70th birthday, she said to me, I think I'll come fast. I was like, really?
Nice.
She was only willing to fast 16 days, 5 days were feeding. Her hands, all of her joints were gnarled and, like this. Half of that disfigurement disappeared in 16 days at the age of 70. And she completed her fast and was on no pain medication for the first time in 35 years. and then she went back to eating everything she ate before. She's still better off than she was, and she just turned 84. She's better off today than she was at 70. Yeah.
Nerve regeneration.
Yeah, again, it depends on how serious it is, and just what's going on. But this might be a good time to tell you a story. Someone asked about the accident I had, construction accident some years back. I don't think I've told you the story, have I? So, let's see. I'll start. I was trying to finish the renovations on my first house to sell it. And I decided it was time to sell it. And I was converting, so this was a house that was built on a crawl space. And after it was built, the first owner, the house was built in 1932, the first owner decided to dig out the basement, to create a basement under half the house. And they added an external stair, and then they built a little enclosure, connected to the house, so that the stair was inside. There was a door that went outside, a glass door, there was a window, and then there was a door from what had been the exterior of the house, the interior of the house to that part. And I decided to create that little space as a greenhouse. So I put a skylight in. My office had a window that used to be there, looked outside, and when they built the space, they bricked it up, and they had put this beautiful pine paneling in. And you could see from the outside, from the inside of the space, you could see the window had been bricked up. So I cleared that back out, put a window back in, and what I wound up with was a view from this room into this little greenhouse space. And I was finishing this up. I tiled the floors. It was a concrete stair down to the basement. I tiled everything. I put in the skylight, drywalled all the unfinished concrete walls, and it was all unfinished block and brick, and then finished everything. And I was standing on a kitchen stool, the swivelly kitchen stools. I'm standing on this kitchen stool at the top of a concrete stairwell. And I had some scraps and tools on the floor, a piece of drywall. So not only was it swivelly, but it also rocked a bit. And I'm thinking, no problem. I can stand on one foot all day long. I've been practicing yoga since I was in my late 20s. I'll be perfectly fine, right? Well, I'm doing this plaster work, this finish work, and I leaned out too far, and I wound up kicking the stool down the stairs. So I go tumbling down this concrete stairs. And when I land on the bottom, there's a stack of what's called corner bead lying on the floor. Now, if you don't know construction, where you have a corner, see this corner that comes into the room here, this closet, right behind Gazelle? The corner comes into the space. Normally, you have a room, the corners are concave. This is convex, it comes into the space. The way you get a sharp corner is there's a metal molding that you screw to you put the drywall up, and you screw this metal molding, it's like an inch or an inch and a half on each face, and it's 90 degrees, you screw it up over the corner, and then you plaster, and it sort of does this, so when you finish it fills up, and then you fill up to the point. You've got a nice sharp point. That's actually a metal point there. It's just painted, okay? I've got a stack of it lying on the floor, and I land on the basement floor. My left wrist comes down right on it. It's like razor thin, and my arm bounces and comes down again. So I severed, on the front of your hand, on this side, you can see tendons moving. Those are called, what are they called? These are flexor tendons. They're flexing the fingers. The extensor tendons. These are the extensors. I severed all my flexor tendons in two places. Okay? There are two arteries that feed your hand. I severed one of the arteries in two places. I severed all the nerves this side of my hand in two places. So, unfortunately, because I landed on the concrete floor, fortunately my head is harder than concrete. Okay, some of you have probably noticed that. Because had it not been harder than concrete, had I been knocked out, I'd have bled to death in 15 minutes. I cut an artery. The blood is pumping out of my arm, right? My poor girlfriend, I lived with a woman at the time, and what I did was I got up and was like, put some pressure on my arm, went upstairs to the kitchen, grabbed a kitchen towel, made a tourniquet to stop the blood flow, and then went and held it here, went and, I think it might have still been a rotary phone, but went and dialed an ambulance, 911, to come pick me up. And I went outside in the front lawn and sat down and waited for them to come pick me up on the front lawn. Okay? A little dizzy from quite a bit of blood loss. And my girlfriend comes home, and there's blood everywhere. And my car's in the driveway, and I'm nowhere to be found. I can only imagine what she might have been thinking. I'm nowhere to be found. I had the presence of mind when I got to the hospital to call and tell her. We actually had an answering machine, right? So there's a little red light bleep beep flashing, and she calls and figures out what happened. Anyway, I go to the hospital. I spend 5 hours in surgery. I'm in shock. So they send a hand surgeon in to see me. And I'm thinking, when I adopted a raw vegan diet and I worked for myself, I decided I wasn't going to pay any more health insurance premiums. So I hadn't been insured for 10 years, and I had no health insurance. And I'm going, shit, this is going to be expensive. So I said to the surgeon, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the surgery. And he said, if you want to use your hand, you have to do the surgery. And I said, I don't have insurance. I'm not sure if I can pay. And he said, that's okay. Just pay when you can, right? So I spent 5 hours in surgery, everything reconnected. I wake up the next morning. They don't tell me, he didn't tell me this is going to happen, but I've got surgical thread sewn through the ends of each of my fingers, okay? It's sewn through the fingernail and right out through the pad of my finger, just hanging there. What the hell? I see him the next day. He tells me the surgery went well, everything's reconnected. I mean, tendon surgery is pretty fine surgery, but he says, there's no use you're ever going to have full use of your hand again. You've done a lot of damage, and you're going to be in physical therapy for at least a year. And he sent me to a guy whose business was called Hand Rehab Services. All he did was rehab hands, okay? I go see Sam the next day. My hand's like this, I can't move anything. It's like this, there's no movement. It's like frozen. And Sam makes a plexiglass hood that was in this shape, and there's a Velcro strap that strapped my palm here and my forearm here to hold this thing. And the threads were tied to little rubber bands, which were safety pinned to the strap down here. So they pulled my fingers down. And as I got movement back, I could extend them, but the rubber bands would pull them back down. So there was no pressure on the repaired tendons. And I saw Sam every day the first week, and then it went to every other day. And this happened on a Sunday morning. Saturday night, this probably didn't help much. Saturday night, one of my closest friends from college got married in her backyard in New Jersey, overlooking the Tappan Zee Bridge, New York City. And by midnight, all my friends are shit-faced. And I'm thinking, yeah, this isn't that much fun. Tomorrow's Sunday. I think I'll drive the 5 hours home so I can get some work done on my house tomorrow at midnight, right? So I do this. I'm not drinking, but I drive home, and I go to bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I wake up at 10 or 9 and start working. So I hadn't had much sleep, and I'm standing on a swivelly wobbly chair, and this is what happens. Anyway, on a Monday morning, 7 weeks and 1 day after the accident, I'm seeing Sam. And he would do all kinds of things. He would massage it. Some of the stuff was like witchcraft. Like crazy. He had this box. I'd stick my hand inside a rubber glove attached to the box, and hot sawdust would blow around. I'm like, okay, this is helping how, or whatever, you're the expert. So he would do all these things, and then he would take some measurements. And on this day, he says, we're sitting across the table from each other. He says, put your palm on the table, and then bend over so we can see how much flexure you have in your wrist, because I had none. It was like this, right? Now, no problem, right? He says, let me see the other one. So I do my right one. That wasn't damaged, and they're almost the same. I said, let me see you do it, Sam. He doesn't have as much flexure in his wrists as I have in the one I've damaged 7 weeks earlier, okay? He tests strength, he tests all these things, and he writes it all down. He's looking at his clipboard, and he says, I don't know how to explain this. I said, what? He says, I've been doing this for 27 years. I've never seen anything like this before. I said, what? He said, you're completely healed. You don't need to come back, right? He had told me 7 weeks earlier, at least a year of physical therapy, at least a year. The surgeon had said at least a year of physical therapy. 7 weeks later, I'm released, fully healed, right? I said, oh, I can explain that, okay? First thing I said was, I've been eating a raw vegan diet now, you know, an optimal diet for whatever it was, at 10 years, whatever was the time. I said, and from the moment of the accident, I stopped eating for the first couple weeks. It's like, stop, what do you mean you stop eating? It's like, I fasted. I fasted so my body could put all of its energy into healing this injury. And he didn't really understand it all, but he believed me. He hired me to help him improve his diet and health, okay? Now I get home and I think to myself, the surgeon's gonna wanna know that people can heal much faster this way, right?
Nope.
So I call, I get him on the phone. I say, hey doc, it's Lauren Locke, remember me? He's like, yeah, I remember you. I said, I just want to let you know that Sam, the hand rehab guy, told me I'm completely healed. He said, okay, thanks, and he hung up. He didn't say, really, what happened? He wasn't interested. Okay, there was a question, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to know the specifics of your fasting regime. And it's not
Rest and sip water.
But like, how did you fast just two weeks from the moment of the accident?
Right.
Okay. And that's what you think contributed to the accelerated healing? Or?
No, I don't think so. I know it. It definitely contributes to accelerated healing. I've got many more stories I can share with you.
Why
But
did you fast longer? I'm just curious.
well, there were two reasons. And one of them was because I was self-employed. I had a big mortgage. I had a big car payment. And I was a little bit nervous about getting further behind. I wasn't getting paid when I wasn't working. Okay, I needed to get out there and earn some money because I had this big bill. Right? I mean, by this point, I'd already, you know, I knew that I had this $25,000 bill that I needed to pay. And I was thinking, I better get back to work. But I'd also fasted at that point dozens of times already. Okay? And my diet had been super clean already for, you know, something like 10 years, 10 years, I forget. And so my body was already working way better than the average body does. And I believe that was probably going to be long enough.
And you didn't alter your diet after the 2-week fast? You kept eating twice a day?
Fruit and salad.
Fruit and salad.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, if you're interested in that sort of thing, I can share some other stories with you another time. We'll
Well, it's interesting
spread those
how
out.
Medical community and even the natural alternative healing community, in cases like that, they really want to push protein, you know? Oh, your body needs a lot of protein to rebuild tissue and yada.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It never does. It never needs a ton of protein. Excess protein is always harmful to our bodies. We don't need that. But they really just don't understand. Any other questions?
What happens when, maybe it's not the right time, I have a brother who is on a lot of medication and his wife, if they were to come in fast, they would have to stop all their medication, right?
They would. The exception isn't really an exception, but it seems like one. And that is type 1 diabetics who take insulin, which is not a medication, it's a hormone. And if their body can't produce, they need to take it.
Yeah.
Okay? And people who've had their thyroid glands surgically removed or irradiated to destroy it, which is what medicine does. If you have a hyperactive thyroid, they just kill the thyroid gland. So you now have to take thyroid hormones. We can't live without thyroid hormones. Okay, they're necessary. So if your body can't make them, you have to take them. And people who take them, whether they're natural hormones, you remember Armour hot dogs? Half the people out, now it's probably now down to 20% or so, almost everyone now takes levothyroxine. It's a artificial hormone. But 20 years ago, a lot of people were still taking Armour thyroid. It's pig thyroid hormone. And you know why it works for humans? Because our thyroid glands are exactly the same. Because not only do we share over 99% of our DNA with our closest primate relatives, we're over 96% identical to a pig.
Their hearts.
And some people I know are even closer than that.
What about if somebody's depressed and on those strong antidepressives that they say you can't just stop, you've got to
Well, you can't
graduate
just stop taking a lot of drugs. So someone who's going to fast that's on these powerful drugs needs to wean off of them.
before they come.
You have to wean off of them. You can't just stop taking them. A lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of off-label drug use. So they make a drug, for instance, to reduce or eliminate seizures, anti-seizure medication. And they find out that anti-seizure drugs seem to help people with depression. Because what happened was they realized that people taking anti-seizure medications don't have any feelings anymore. So they give it to people that are depressed. They don't feel bad because they don't feel anything, okay? But if you stop taking anti-seizure medications, guess what? You get seizures. There's an example. You have to wean off that stuff. In some cases, slowly. So you have to plan for it. But yes, you have to get off the drugs. And there are people, I get contact from people who say, I'm on these drugs, can I? Yeah, you have to get off of them. Oh, never mind. But the drugs are killing you. They're poison. They're not helping you. You're never going to heal. Okay, if you fast, you might actually, yeah, but I can't get off the drug. Okay. You have to get off the drugs. You can't take these toxic substances while you're fasting.